I held this very external perception that I was healthy, that I was this person who was the clean eater, that I went to the gym all the time, that I was like super healthy. People would always compliment me. Oh my gosh, you're so strong. You're so good. And I didn't want anyone to burst that bubble of I am this perfect eater. And so sometimes, and we might do this for our kids too. We want our kids to think, oh, we're healthy. We have a good relationship with food. So we put on this external perception. And so ultimately, secret eating is trying to control how others see us and also how we see ourselves.
Welcome to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast. I'm so glad you're here listening in as I get to the heart of the matter with the world's leading experts and authors in personal growth, transformation, positive psychology, and more. If you're a change maker, a cycle breaker, a revolutionary envisioning a more beautiful way to live, work, and play, well, me too. I'm your host, Ryann Watkin, and for the past decade, I've been alchemizing challenges to find the calm in the chaos. I believe we can change the world by starting at home in our own minds and hearts. And my hope is that these conversations are a light on your path. Let's go, wild ones. Hello and welcome back to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast. So happy you're here. As always, this is Ryann, your host. And today we are diving in with my new friend, Amber Abila. Amber is an eating coach who helps women stop overeating and binge eating by rewiring their brain so they can feel normal and in control around any food. She had the perfect life from the outside, but kept her binge eating a secret struggle. And then through coaching and psychology, she learned there was nothing wrong with her, and she just needed some simple brain tools to help making dramatic shifts in her eating habits in life. Now she walks others step by step through the process that's worked for her and countless others in her Confident Eater program. She also has a podcast of her own called Become a Confident Eater. She walks through her 6 pillars of her program at the end of the episode, so make sure to stick around for that. The way that she talks about food and overeating is just so practical. Like, I absolutely loved this conversation. And I love Amber's take on how we can just do better by making really, really simple changes. So in this episode, we talk about binge eating and emotional eating, and if those two are the same thing. We talk a little bit about the shame surrounding binge eating. We talk about the stories we have in our head about our bodies and our weight. We talk about intermittent fasting. We talk about what healthy eating actually looks like. And that's when she outlines the 6 pillars from her course, which are really amazing, simple, and practical. We also talk about like the line between healthy or conscious eating and disordered eating. Because what I see a lot out there in the world is like this fear narrative, even from the so-called like health food space or the so-called like healthy, intuitive, or, whatever eating space. And so we talk about that a lot. And Amber's focus is all about just going within, finding out how something feels for you, changing your habits, creating new habits that feel good. And who doesn't want that? So yeah, this conversation is absolutely amazing. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Let's jump in.
Please note, the opinions and perspectives of guests on the Raising Wild Hearts podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Ryann Watkin or anyone associated with the Raising Wild Hearts podcast.
Hey, Amber, welcome to the Raising Wild Hearts podcast.
Hi, Ryann. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, totally. I'm so excited that you're here and that we connected online. Just love it when I can meet someone who's loves to chat and has a podcast and wants to help moms and women be better versions of themselves. So yay for whatever platform it was. I think it was Instagram. And one of the places I want to kick off is from something I heard you say on your podcast called Becoming a Confident Eater. By the way, everyone go follow Amber at her podcast. But you talked about the stories that we have in our head. And I was just like, yes, yes, yes. And you talked about like many of us have these stories and these ways that we think we're going to feel if we get 15 pounds lighter, or if our butt looks like this, or if our, thighs look like that. And we're like making up this story in our head that we're like not going to feel any pain, and that like we'll have, sex every day, and that our kids will be little angels, and that we're not going to have any problems in our life because we're skinny or less weight, or our thighs are amazing. And I just thought that was so hilarious because I've done that before. We have a tendency to go like, everything would just be fine if I could only XYZ. And of course, that's not even limited to our bodies. But right now, we're going to talk about bodies. We're going to talk about food. So I want to dive into those stories and tell somebody who's listening, like how they can call BS on these body stories that they have about themselves.
Yeah. So a little bit about my background with that. I spent a lot of years, like many other women, trying to make my body smaller because I thought it would give me these amazing things. So this is what I call it, like our magical fantasy land of thinness, where it's like, okay, if I could be, under 120 pounds, I just imagined that everything in my life would be better, that the boys would all love me, that I would have better friendships, that I would finally get the job I wanted, that I wouldn't have to deal with any negative emotions anymore because I would be thin and everything in my life would probably be perfect. And we can even get to that place. Like a lot of us have lost weight before, and we've realized if we look at our actual experience of what happens when we lose weight, it's usually not all that great. A lot of times our brain has a bias too when it tends to over glamorize past experiences. This is why we'll have like a horrible vacation, but we'll be like, wow, remember we went on that vacation? It was so fun. Like we should go on vacation again. And it was like,
Happened.
actually,
I've done that. Yeah, totally.
But the vacation like wasn't as great as I imagined. And a lot of times we tend to forget our history with dieting and with food. So I spent a lot of years doing kind of like, I would call it the modern version of dieting, where it's like calorie counting, intermittent fasting, like these things that we might not traditionally label as like diets because they're not like keto and Atkins and like very strict, rigid rules around it. But they're still a diet because they still have these restrictions around it, and they're still done with the purpose of lots of weight loss. I teach that it's not a bad thing to want to lose weight, but we need to do it as like a cherry on top type of goal versus like the main purpose of why we're doing something. Because when it becomes the main purpose, then what happens is even if you do get to that 120 pounds, whatever number you have in your head, it's really hard to maintain because then you've lost all motivation of, well, why do I want to keep it now? Your bubble gets burst and it's like, wait, my life still has shitty emotions in it and hard times. Like, how do I manage these? Because all I ever learned was the skill of how to eat less food and willpower my way through it. So your bubble bursts and you're like, well, now what do I do? And then that's when a lot of people gain back the weight because they haven't found, why is eating healthier truly meaningful to me in a deeper purpose beyond just changing my body?
Hey, it's me, Ryan. So something I do every single day to invest in my growth, besides connecting with the humans on this podcast, obviously, is reading. Reading is where it all started for me. I was 5 when I became obsessed with books, writing them, reading them, collecting them. I love how I can get inspired with new ideas and stories and ways to grow. That's why I ask all my guests what they're reading. And finally, you can check out all the book recommendations from the experts and authors on the show in one place at raisingwildhearts.com/books. There are some life changers in there like You Are the Placebo, and a few hidden gems like Sacred Motherhood and Living, Loving, and Learning. So if you want to get your hands on your next great read, check out the full list by heading to raisingwildhearts.com/books. Okay, back to the show. Yeah, so good. Okay, you said a lot there that I want to unpack. The first thing I thought of when you were talking was like, we're on this like hamster wheel, this like chase of like, we'll be happy when, and we're like, then you're saying, you know, we lose the weight or get the job or get married or have the kids or do the whatever thing that we think is going to make us happy. And then it was almost like, wait a minute, the chase was the fun part. And now I have the thing, and now I can't celebrate or be grounded in this accomplishment that I made because there was no like mission or deeper purpose or why attached to it. So like that's something that we talk about in the show, like having a mission, having a purpose, having a why. So I love that. And then you said a word that I want to break down. You said the word willpower. What is willpower? Like, is that what's important when we are maintaining our ideal weight or wanting to lose weight? Like, is it just willpower?
What willpower is when we are just trying to will our way through our decisions. And what that looks like specifically is trying to just tell ourselves, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. No, no, no. Think about if you're talking to a child that way and you're just trying to tell them something like, just don't do that. No, you're not allowed to have that. Like, what's the reaction? Is they usually like argue back to you. They throw a fit. Like our brains don't like hearing the word no, because to our survival brain, that could mean like restriction and we're not getting what we want, and what we want might help our survival. So if we tell ourselves no around food, like we can think about what our survival brain thinks in that moment. It's like, well, why not? Food is good for us. Food is good for our survival. Like, why are we telling ourselves no around the carbs? And that can often make us want it more. Then we're like, well, I actually really, really want it. And then it makes it so much harder. So you can willpower your way through it. That's how people make diets successfully work, because 95% of diets fail. So the people who it does work through, or works for a little bit for, is the people who can really say, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And the truth is, people think when they come to me and they think, oh my gosh, I just don't know if I can stop binge eating, it's really difficult. I'm like, no, you actually have the most willpower out of anyone in all of history, because you are really good at trying to fight your way through. So if we can add some actual tools into that don't require willpower and are much easier for your brain to process, it's not going to be so hard. So willpower is not a good long-term strategy. And something that comes up is if you have a hard time eating at night and struggling with all the evening cravings, that's usually because you're willpowering your way through the day. And it's easy to do that in the morning. You're like, all right, I'm going to have a good day today. I'm not going to overeat. I'm going to be good. But then by the time the end of the day comes, your brain is so depleted. You're so tired. You've been using your energy all day long that that strategy no longer works. So then the question is, well, what do we do instead? If we're not going to just like tell ourselves, no, don't eat the food, this is kind of a complicated answer because there's a lot of different ways around it besides just saying no. And feeling no seems simple. Like we decide, all right, I'm not going to eat carbs anymore, so I'm just going to fight my way through it all day and I'm just going to say no to everything. That seems simple on the surface, but it's not a sustainable long-term strategy. So one simple strategy that I use for that instead is, instead of telling ourselves no around food, we want to tell ourselves when we'll have it. So instead of saying, no cake for you right now, you've already had cake. And again, this is like a strategy you can use with your kids too. Instead of saying no cake right now, we'll say, well, when can we have the cake? So maybe that's, we've already had cake today, but let's have cake tomorrow at lunch. We'll pack a little slice and we'll bring it with us to lunch. Or let's not have cake right now, but let's have it if we're hungry again and we can have it with dinner. And then that gives our brain like a concrete idea of when we're going to have it. And so it feels more safe to our biological brain than just trying to keep saying our way no all the way to like some infinite point that we don't know when we're going to have cake again.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so you said something that I want to break down. You said when you were talking about us, like in the morning being like, oh, okay, we're going to start off the day great and I'm going to be good. And, when you say that phrase, like, I'm going to be good, I think so many of us, myself included, internalize these like, beliefs and ideas around food, that there is good food and that there is bad food. And I still see it even now, like with my family of origin, no names, but, I still see these like labels being put on food as something good, or, oh, that's bad. And it's like, okay, first of all, like that's kind of arbitrary, because what you're calling bad is like, actually, I think like butter's really healthy. Like it's a really healthy fat, and so, and depending on what, of course, like philosophy and quote unquote diet you follow. There's like different nutrients and everything. But to break down the like good and the bad, this like dichotomy that we have around food, like, are you seeing that many people do label food like that's so bad, I'm never going to eat that, I'm going to be good? And like taking that a step further, we're internalizing it for ourselves is if we eat this thing, we're bad. And if we don't eat this thing or just eat a stick of lettuce and a carrot, whatever it is, like then we're good. Like it then determines who we are as people. Let's break that down a little bit.
Right. Absolutely. What I want everyone to do is pause the episode and write out, what does it actually mean to be good around food? Because we have this abstraction in our mind, but you might not actually even know, like, well, what would it take for me to be good around food? So write out, like, if I were to be good around food, then XYZ would have to happen. Then I want to eat XYZ. And you might realize that this is actually a lot harder than you imagine to write down what's good and what's bad. But let's say you make this little list and you're like, okay, unprocessed foods are good. Fruits and vegetables are good. Processed foods are bad. Sugar is bad. Like those are some common ones. And then I want you to go through and really question if those things are truly true. So let's think, is all unprocessed food good? Well, maybe you're allergic to peanut butter and then it's not good. And even though, I mean, I guess peanut butter, maybe some people would think is processed too. Because then it's like, what does processed even mean? Totally. Is a fruit and nut bar that's like just fruit and nuts, that's technically processed. Is that bad? Is that good? We don't know because there's so much nuance to it. But something like fruits and vegetables. Okay, bananas. Are bananas good? I mean, maybe, but if you're on your 10th banana of the day, then that might be like starting to get into too much sugar and carbs for your body. And then there's something like, is sugar bad? People have a lot of hard time with this one because they're like, yeah, like clearly, especially added sugar. Is added sugar bad? Yeah, like we don't need added sugar. But you might think about if you're going for a long run and people have these goo packets, it's literally just sugar. If you were to eat broccoli in the middle of your run, that is not going to be good for you. You're going to get a big stomachache because your body doesn't need broccoli in that moment. It needs pure sugar. So there's little situations where we do need pure sugar. And even if you're not running or doing like something super active, sometimes sugar can just bring us joy. And joy can be healthy. And connecting with others can be healthy. And not stressing about the entire birthday party the whole time you're there because there's cake in the corner. That is not healthy in itself because that causes a lot of stress and anxiety in our body, which is also not good. So it's really nuanced. And then once we start to break this apart, we can realize, it's a lot harder to realize what's good and bad. But when we tell ourselves we have to be good today, what we're doing is we're holding ourselves to an ultra unrealistic standard of what that means. Because then all of a sudden we have that fruit and nut bar and we're like, well, maybe we're being bad now. Or we have, some cheese puffs that are in the cabinet. We're like, oh, we're being bad now. And so then there's like all these little instances where we start to feel like, oh, we're not being good. We're not being good. We're not being perfect, which again, it's like, if you recognize it's not really even possible to be perfect around good food because there is no perfect way to eat, then it always feels like we're never good enough. We're never eating good enough. We're never eating healthy enough. And then we get into that all or nothing thinking where we say, screw it. We're already being bad today. We're already being bad this week. Let's just keep eating. And that's one of the biggest things that I found for myself that kept me binge eating for a really long time is holding this unrealistic standard of perfection for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you think, like for you brought up binge eating. I wonder if binge eating and emotional eating are the same thing. I kind of like am familiar with the term emotional eating. I've never considered my habits to be binge eating, but I have said like, oh, I am an emotional eater, or like I will eat when I'm stressed, or this or that. So like, what's the difference between those two? And then what was causing you to binge eat in your life? Was it emotionally? Like, were you seeking love? What were you seeking?
Great question. So I actually take an unconventional approach to this. I think there are a lot less people emotional eating than they think they are emotional eating. I think emotional eating is not that big of a thing. I'm not saying it is not a thing because it definitely is. But for me, so I work with people who are binge eating and overeating because there's this kind of fine line that I found myself in where sometimes it was true binge eating, where I was eating like 3,000 calories from the cabinet all at once, just putting anything and everything in my mouth, switching between the chocolate and the chips and then this and then eat a protein bar randomly. And it was just like all of it all in there. And then sometimes it would be more overeating where I would eat like 3 cookies after lunch. And I'm like, that really did not feel good in my body, but it wasn't totally out of control. I was kind of mindful for it. So I kind of have this fine line, and I just say I work with people who eat too much food, who eat more food than they want to be eating, and who are stressed about food, who want to heal their relationship with food, because sometimes it can change even throughout the day. So now emotional eating is eating because you're trying to solve an emotion, right? So you're sad and you want to feel better. Okay, I'm going to go find a cookie. And then that can work at times because it works for about like 30 seconds where we eat and we're like, this is good. But what I think is actually happening for the majority of people is habitual eating. And this is something I rarely hear people talk about, which is why I started my coaching career, because this is what changed everything for me. A lot of times in traditional binge eating recovery, they go a lot into your emotions, into your past. So if you ever go to a therapist for emotional eating, overeating, binge eating, what you're going to look at is, where does this start? Was there any trauma? Were you trying to, cope in some way? And then you'll also look at, like, how are you unhappy in your life and how can you fix that right now? This was not an approach that worked for me and a lot of other people because, one, there's not always a big trauma involved in binge eating. Sometimes there is. Sometimes there can be some sexual abuse, some big life event that was really traumatic that can trigger binge eating. But for the vast majority of people, and people I especially work with, it's usually because you started dieting. So what happens is you start dieting, and because we have this lower survival part of our brain that is formed from thousands of years ago and has not changed since then, your lower brain does not know the difference between a juice cleanse and a famine in the world. It does not know, we're trying to be healthy. We've got these $30 juices from Erewhon that we're going to be really good with and clean with all this week. It just sees, oh my gosh, food must be disappearing off the face of the planet. There's no more blueberry bushes around. We better get it all in so we don't die. It's trying to help you. And so that's usually where our first binge happens, our first thing of overeating happens, is we had some form of restriction, whether that's mental restriction, we told ourselves these foods are bad, we probably shouldn't be eating them, or it's a true physical restriction where we're not getting in enough food. And then from there, what happens is a lot of times, because our brain is really sensitive and changes around food, and most of us do not know the psychology of our brains, we start getting in the habit of overeating or the habit of binge eating. And we don't really know about our habits. Luckily, it's becoming a lot more of common knowledge about how our habits are formed. And so then we start getting these urges where every single time we're around a certain food or a certain situation or a certain time of day, we think, I just want to eat. And we're like, I don't know why I want to eat. I just want to have food. And then we're getting these urges, and none of us have any tools for these urges. And so then we just go in and we start eating. And that food is what's reinforcing this habit loop. Our brain says, oh, she must want to do this. Great job, Amber. Great job, Ryan. Here's your reward. You have the food. Let's make sure you keep doing this because you clearly want to do this. You've done this every day for the last 10 years. This has now become a really strong habit. So one thing I'm going to give you that's going to be in the show notes is my guided urge audio. So this is an audio I created, and it's something that I so wish I had in my journey, which is a 7-minute audio that you can just pop into your ears with your headphones or play out loud if you're alone. That's going to walk you through how to get through these urges, because that's ultimately how I rewired my brain to not binge eat anymore, is by learning how to sit with these urges. Now, sitting with urges can be really similar to sitting with emotions. And this is something else I teach around emotional eating, is you don't have to have your perfect life in order to stop emotional eating. Because this is something that felt really unrealistic to me in therapy. It felt like I had to manage all my ducks really well, because if anything got out of line, I was going to binge then. And so I had to be really stress-free and calm all the time and make sure I was meditating all day long, because if something happened, oh no, that's a binge trigger and I'm going to binge. And that's really not the case. I still have a lot of bad things happen in my life. I still have a lot of negative emotions. Of course, through coaching, I have managed those so much better and I feel happier overall, but things still happen in my life. The difference is I don't binge because I know I can sit with these emotions. I can sit with any urges that come up, and I don't need to do anything about them. I think about it like carrying a purse that you can just take around with you, and you don't need to do anything about it, and eventually you'll set it down and it will go away. Yeah.
So is there a case for you or your clients or anybody where you have an urge to eat something and it's I'm going to follow that urge? Or is it most of the time you're actually just not hungry? Do you say if you're hungry and you sit with it and you decide, yes, I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat, then you go eat? Is the key not binging, just go eat something and then walk away? Is it that kind of a thing?
So the first thing I'll say, if hunger is not a problem, food is not going to be the solution. So food cannot do anything for us other than give us fuel, like at the basis of it. Now, that does not mean sometimes food does not help us connect and to do other things in our life. But at the basis of it, if we're not hungry, food can't really do anything for us, because we wouldn't ever tell ourselves, if you're really upset, go drink water. Like maybe, like if you're thirsty, that might help. It might help calm you down if you're really thirsty. But if you're not thirsty, if you're like, well, I just had water, you're not going to be like, well, you're really upset, go drink some water. Because we know that's not the right solution for that. We're going to say, oh, go take some deep breaths. Let's, give ourselves a hug, make ourselves a nice cup of tea. I guess that's kind of drinking something. But, tea can be calming in the properties of it. Yeah. So we're not going to give ourselves food if we're not hungry. It's not going to do anything for it. Now, that doesn't mean we have to 100% of the time be perfect and never eat when we're not hungry. So this is where we get into the difference between an urge and a craving. So cravings are a little bit gentler than urges. Urges feel urgent. They feel like I used to feel like a ghost out of my body. I am out of my body right now, and my body has gone into the cabinets. It is doing its thing, and I'm not going to come back into my body until I see the wrappers around me and, oh no, all the food is gone. Yeah. That is kind of an urge, and it feels like very intense. Like you can see I'm even moving my hands a lot. It feels like this energy is rising up in our chest. It feels like your heart is beating really fast. A craving is more like, I think I'd like a cookie right now, and you're feeling a little calm about it. If you're working on changing your relationship with food, we might need to do a little work to get to the place where you do feel calm around your cravings and you trust yourself, but it feels a little bit softer, a little bit easier, and more like, if you get honest with yourself and you're like, you know what, do I feel like I could be really satisfied with one cookie right now? You'll be like, yeah. But if it's an urge, you'll be like, if I'm being honest, I want like 10 cookies and I want to eat like the whole bag of chips that's in the cabinet right now as well. So if we can get honest with ourselves about how is this feeling in my body, if it's feeling calmer, that's more of a craving. Now, cravings are something that are totally normal to act on. We want to make sure we still have space in our body for them. So if you're truly like, I'm really full right now, that's where it might start getting into the urge territory, and we don't want to act on that craving or urge. But if you're like, you know what? I have some space in my body, I could have a cookie. That's totally fine to act on. That's totally fine, because that's just part of being human, is sometimes desiring food that is delicious. And so that's something that where you can be like, yeah, like I'm going to have this. This is totally okay. I'm allowed to enjoy these foods peacefully. I'm allowed to include them in my life. So definitely cravings are something that are not something to be scared of. I mean, urges aren't either, but urges are something that we can see more a little habitually too. So if you, for example, every day after work, you are not hungry, for sure that you're going to have dinner in 2 hours, and you're like, really, like, I'm just like not feeling hungry, but you want to eat, that's probably more of an urge.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for differentiating those two. Super helpful. And I like felt that in my body, how like the craving is just calmer. Like you don't feel like you need to like run somebody over on the way to the kitchen and like go on this like lunatic rampage to like find the sweet thing or whatever it is. Okay. Makes sense. I've had both of those for sure. And as we've been having this conversation, I'm like reflecting a little bit of like, my journey with food, like, where did it start to get a little iffy? Where did it start to get a little like gray? And for me, I'm just like reflecting a little bit. And I think throughout my life as a kid, I had parents, in particular a mother and a grandmother and aunties who would limit the food. And so we would go out to dinner, or we'd have family dinner at the house, or even just like a regular weeknight. And it was like, this is like your allotment. Like this is what you get, girl. And like, if there was like a piece of chicken and like some green beans and like a piece of bread with butter, I'd be like, I want like 3 pieces of bread with butter and like 2 pieces of chicken and like some green beans. Like, but it was like, no, like this is what you have. Like eat this, and you don't get any more of the things that you want and that your body's craving. And so I had this like kind of these external forces, humans in this case, saying, no, that's the limit. And then also like doing the good bad thing on dessert and, sweet things, or too much sugar. Or back in my day in the 80s and like early 90s, it was like fat was bad. It's like the trend of the decade, whatever. Mm-hmm. So when I got to college, so I hit 18, went to college, and then of course, you have a little more freedom in college. There's like the joke of the freshman 15, but I didn't have that internal sense of, oh, now I'm done, because I didn't get to practice it as a kid. I didn't get to practice like, oh, actually 3.5 pieces of bread with butter is too much, like, or 2 pieces of bread with butter. Like I didn't have the, whatever, I don't know how to name that, but I didn't have that. And so for me, I just kind of like just went all out starting in college. And I just like enough was never enough. It was like always just more. And then of course I had access to like different food and fried food and pizza and just like cheap, gross, like freshman dorm food, right? And so I found myself like really overeating things that weren't allowed as a kid. And then also just like things that my body wanted to that had been restricted for 18 years. And so I think that's like where my relationship with food got funny as I've gotten older, as I've done personal growth and spiritual growth. Like I've certainly noticed many of those patterns. Now where I'm standing today, I still have funny little habits that I do. And one of the things that you mentioned before we started recording, I think this is a good place to throw that in and hear your conversation about it or your thoughts on it. Like one of the things we do as moms, as women, is like kind of hide. There's like this shame or this secret eating. And part of that is because like we don't want the kids to like eat the good cookies or eat the whatever it is that we have. And so we're like almost hiding, like sometimes figuratively and literally. So what's your take on all of that? But like, let's also delve into this secret eating, this like hiding in the pantry. I've like gone around the hallway before and like we have this little bench that's kind of like out of everyone's view. And I've like sat there and like ate my dried mango because I didn't want anyone asking me for a damn piece of mango. And it wasn't like really anything other than that. But I'm like, oh, what a funny habit that is. And like kind of a light bulb right now. So let's hear your thoughts on all that.
So the first thing I want to point out is, you know, the other woman in your life from generations ago, they were probably trying to help you in a way that they didn't really know how to help you, right? In the sense of they were trying to teach you moderation, but in a way that was actually very scarce. And I think sometimes moms think that, you know, I need to kind of control their food because I don't want them to end up overweight, stressed about food, eating too much like I did. And so I'm going to make sure I control it and say, oh, you can only have this much, or here's your portion. But what that really does, again, to our survival brain, we have to think about survival brain and all of this, is it learns that food is scarce, that there is not enough food in the world. And so then when you become an adult and you have free access to food, your brain's like, woohoo, we can finally have all that we want. We can finally get enough. And so that's where it leads to this overeating because it's like, okay, I want to make sure that we're safe now, that we have enough. And so a lot of the work that I do with people on that is showing them how like food is truly so abundant in our life, like really reminding ourselves, like, let's take a minute to open up our pantry for a minute. And like, we couldn't go to the grocery store for the next 3 months and we'd have food to eat. Right. Or our freezers or our second freezers or our second fridge, like our garage, like we have so much food available to us now. And we have to remind our brains that like, we're not restricted to food anymore. We're not deprived. Like we have plenty and it's always available to us. Any time of the day that we want it, we have food. And then when we're out of the house, at every single corner of the road, there is some sort of fast food, grocery store, gas station, like something where we could get food. So secret eating is something like, first, I just want to normalize because there can be so much shame around it. But like, I have eaten in bathroom stalls. I have pulled things out of the trash can and like run the other direction to my room with them. Like, it is something that a lot of people can have a lot of shame around, but it is a normalized thing because of all this guilt and shame that's placed around us. Especially as women, we are taught this idea that the worst thing we can be is overweight and like gluttonous and taking too much for us. And that kind of gets interpreted as, oh, we're eating too much. We're going to gain weight. We're being too greedy with things. And that can contribute to our idea of we want to hide away from this. We don't want anyone to see us. So secret eating can look like a few of these things, like we've mentioned already. I think it can also look like if you are going out to eat and let's say you order the salad, but then you go home and you binge on chips and cookies in the cabinet. If you continue to eat the cake frantically when you're at a birthday party and you're like putting it away, or you go to another room with it. After you put your kids to bed, if you start raiding the cabinets, like look for these times where you feel this need to hide, because that's the time we want to actually shine a light on it and say, what's going on here? We often want to be like, oh, that didn't happen. Just pretend it didn't happen, but it did. So like we want to look at it. And I think a lot of times secret eating can stem from this idea of good and bad foods, right? That we're being a good person or a bad person right now, which we've kind of touched on. Yeah. But also for me is I held this very external perception that I was healthy, that I was this person who was the clean eater, that I went to the gym all the time, that I was like super healthy. People would always compliment me. Oh my gosh, you're so strong. You're so good. And I didn't want anyone to burst that bubble of I am this perfect eater. And so sometimes, and we might do this for our kids too. We want our kids to think, oh, we're healthy. We have a good relationship with food. So we put on this external perception. And so ultimately, secret eating is trying to control how others see us and also how we see ourselves. But something that really changed things for me is realizing that even if no one else sees, there's always someone watching, and that's us. We are always seeing what we do. And we are negatively impacting our relationship with ourselves when we're trying to hide from ourselves, when we're trying to not acknowledge these behaviors. And so you can almost think about it as like, you watching you from afar of like, what if I was watching myself right now? Like, what would I think of this? Yeah. And recognizing this isn't something I want to do. I am still seeing this. I am still breaking down this trust with my body. And so we want to think about, like, I always ask myself, would I be doing this if I was in full view of other people right now? And maybe the answer is yes. Like, I'm eating some dried mango right now. I'm hungry. Yeah, I want to eat my dried mango. But maybe it's a sign too that we're doing something we don't want to be doing, that we're going into a binge right now and we don't want anyone to see the binge. So sometimes the secret eating can be a sign that, hey, this is a behavior that we actually does not feel aligned with us and we don't actually want to be doing. So we want to shine a light on it and start to look at, well, why are we doing this in the first place? But if it's something where it's like, yeah, I feel okay doing this. I'm having a cookie right now. Like, having a cookie is not bad. I can sit down and have it. Then we want to really challenge ourselves to sit down and eat it in front of people. Like, literally make it a challenge of, I'm going to sit down and eat this in front of my kids. Now, of course, like you mentioned, one of the barriers to this is like, well, I don't want my kids eating this food too. I want my dried mangoes. I don't want them eating it. Or I want the cookies. I don't want them asking for cookies. They already had a cookie today. The first thing I would say is any food you bring into your house, you should be okay with your kids having. Because if we get into like, this is my food, this is your food, then it creates this perception again that food is scarce, that I only can have this food and mom can have this food. And once I get older, I'm going to want all of mom's foods that I was never allowed. So making sure that like it's available to everyone. But also that when we're sitting down and eating it, that if our kids ask for, hey, I want a cookie, either allowing them to have it or explaining to them why you're having one and they're not. Because it's confusing. Why does mom get a treat and I don't? Yeah. And it can be, hey, honey, like, I haven't had a treat today yet. I haven't had a cookie, and you had a cookie 3 hours ago. So I chose to wait to have my cookie to now, and I'm going to eat mine now. And if you would like one again tomorrow, you can have one tomorrow, and maybe I'll have one tomorrow with you too. But just kind of explaining this idea of it's not I get one and you don't, but like, let's explain why. Or if they haven't had a cookie, just letting them join in with you. And you can really model this example of let's sit down, let's enjoy it mindfully. Let's ask, how is this food tasting? Do we enjoy it? How does your body feel after? How is your body feeling right now? Are you hungry right now? Because maybe let's have something that fuels our body a little bit more first, and then let's have a cookie. So instead of like avoiding the conversation, like really leaning into it and explaining like, why am I having the cookie? Why are you going to have a cookie? And getting into like these discussions around food.
Love it. And so much of it, what I'm hearing you say, like comes from modeling, like big surprise here on this show. Like it all comes down to like how we're being. And that's what I think our kids will ultimately start to grasp. And it's interesting. I used to be, my kids are 3, 8, and 10 now. And with my older 2, when they were really little, I used to restrict a lot. I mean, we would go to like the birthday party and they would opt out of cake, but everyone would eat cake. And that was like a handful of times. And then as they've gotten older, for simplicity, and then also because of the research I've done, because of the things that I want to pass down to them and the ways I want them to feel allowed to be in this world and allowed to want, which you kind of touched on, I have let much of that go. Like if they're at a party, of course you can have kids. Like it's not even a question now. And so I've let a lot of that go. And before I thought I was doing what was good. You know, they had never had like birthday cake yet, or like that was like filled with the sugar and whatever. And so there is this idea for me now of like modeling this moderation, a word that you used. So yes, I love that. That all makes sense. It can be a conversation. We can be aware. We don't have to be like freaking out about it or worried about being perfect, which is something you've alluded to as well. So now that we've kind of like laid out some of these like quirky habits that we all have, some of the overeating, some of the binge eating, some of the hiding eating, what does a healthy relationship with food look and feel like?
So this is different for everyone else, and also a good thing to like take out a piece of paper and write down, like, what does it mean to me to even have a healthy relationship with food? Because sometimes that can be hard. Like, we might not even know what that might look like. Or when people come to me and they've been binge eating for like 20, 30, 40, 50 years, like we might not even remember a time before that and be like, I don't remember what a good relationship with food looks like. So what I like to start with first is looking at, what don't you like about your eating habits? Because I think that's always easier to find and point out, is like, what eating habits feel like they're not serving me? What ways of eating feel like they aren't aligned to me, that I don't really love? And you can get out those lists, and then you can think about the opposite of them. So it's like, I'm not really loving the secret eating. I don't really love feeling like I'm hiding from my kids, which ultimately too is like, to touch on this one more time, it's almost like you're lying to yourself and to your kids about what a healthy relationship with food looks like. And kids almost always know. Like, I remember I would go up to bed, I'd be getting ready for bed, and I'd hear my mom go raiding through the cabinets and hear all the chips being pulled out and all the munching and like,
I
so I would hear these
so
things
distinctly. And I was like, what? She gets to do that?
Yeah. Right. So it's like, kids are always watching and they always know and they always hear. It's kind of like if you are arguing with your spouse, you're about to get a divorce, you're always yelling at each other in the other room, and you're trying to pretend like everything's fine. Like, kids know that there's something wrong here. And that doesn't mean you have to go explain right away, hey, we're having all these problems, or hey, I'm having a horrible relationship with food. But just doing your best to really just be honest about the situation and what's going on, and not pretending like there's this beautiful layer of perfection that's over everything. And you can even talk about like, hey, like, I was taught about diets when I was a kid, and I'm working on getting away from that. And this is what dieting looks like, and here's what I want to have instead. So even you can talk through of, here's what I'm working on. And I'm working on being more mindful and sitting at a table. Do you want to try sitting at the table with me? And maybe we can have a fun conversation, or maybe we can play a game while we're sitting at the table. Like, really bringing your kids into this. But yeah, I would ask yourself, like, where am I stressed around food? Where does food bring me stress, anxiety, fear, panic? Because anytime you have these negative emotions around food, that's usually a sign that we want to look at it a bit deeper. Any strong emotions around food, I think, is a sign of, okay, why is that, and where can we unpack that? Because food is just a neutral thing. It's just an object in this world. We don't have a lot of strong feelings about water. We have water when we need water, and then we move on with our life. And if we're thirsty, sometimes we drink water really fast, and we enjoy it, and we're like, oh, I love water, and then we just move on with our life. It's not a big deal. So that's how we want to get to the place, ideally, of thinking about food, is like, oh, I'm hungry, I eat food. Sometimes I'm really hungry, and I eat food a little faster and a little bit more. Sometimes I forget to eat, and that's okay too. But most of the times, I give myself food when I am hungry, and I stop when I'm full. So trying to get ourselves to that place, I think, is really the ideal of where we have food neutrality and we don't have these good, bad food labels. Now, how we get there, that can be a big process to unpack. I have a full 6-month program called my Confident Eater program that we go through 6 pillars. So I can outline these pillars that I think are a really good place that you can kind of look at each of these areas and where you might need more skills or more where you might want to do more research on it. The first one being having a positive food mindset. So this is, again, really getting rid of those good, bad food labels. I teach a lot of mindful eating in my work, and that can be really useful because it helps shine that light again on what are we actually doing here. We can't change what we don't know. And in order for our brain pathways to rewire themselves, we have to light them up. And how we do that is by having very specific awareness of what's happening. One really fun study that they've done with OCD people is with people who were really obsessed with washing their hands and like always feeling like they were unclean. They asked them once to tell them all these like really specific details about how they wash their hands. What hand do you put on the soap dispenser to push it? How many times do you pump the soap? What hand do you use to turn on the sink? Do you wash your hands flat against each other, or do you cross your fingers? And when they did that, they were actually able to stop washing their hands and do it less, infinitely more times. I don't remember the exact statistic, but then they normally did, because they were all of a sudden paying attention. They weren't going to this automatic habit loop of, once I see the dirt on my hands or once I feel this thing on my hands, then I just start washing them, then it just starts the habit. They were able to pause that habit pathway and say, well, what's actually going on here? And we can do that with food too. So the more mindful you can be around food, the more curious you can get around your habits, the easier it will be to interrupt them and say, wait a second, I don't want to be doing this right now. Like, what's really going on? So that's the first part, positive food mindset. The second thing I work on is learning how to eat everything in moderation. And I do this with my signature trigger food process. The trigger food process is basically how we learn to include these foods back into our life. You're not going to be able to learn how to eat them without practicing them, right? So the only way to learn how to eat in moderation is by practicing eating in moderation. If you try to just cut them out of your life forever, guess what? You're going to go to a wedding and there's going to be cake pops and you're never going to have practice eating cake pops. So you're going to eat them as your old self would. So we need to start practicing eating things in moderation. The third thing I go into is our urges. And so for that, I would really recommend, again, getting that urge audio that's in the show notes. Fourth, I go into hunger and fullness. So this is, we need to learn how to be, what is our hunger saying? What is our fullness saying? And this is like the most accurate calorie counter that you'll ever have in the world. And the good news is it's free. You don't have to pay for a subscription. It can go with you anywhere on the world. It can go with you on vacation. You don't have to pay someone to make you a meal plan forever. Like, your hunger and fullness signals are there for you for a reason. And they do all of this already for you. So sometimes we have to relearn them a little bit, but they're always in there. If you've been dieting for a while, that dial might be tuned down, but we can work on like slowly tuning it up by tuning into our body and learning to trust it. Fifth, I go into confidence. So this is releasing that expectation that we talked about in this beginning, that if we get to X size, we're going to be infinitely happy, and really learning that we can be happy at any size. And what really contributes most to our happiness is not our weight and shape, but the quality of our life, the quality of our habits. Those are what's really important. And then finally, we want to maintain our progress, and we do this by shifting our identity. So this is one that's really important. A lot of people, they'll make progress, and they hit these beliefs about themselves, which is, I've always struggled with food. I'll always be someone who overeats. I'm just someone who is X size. And when we have these beliefs, it feels unsafe to go past them. And so we stay in this like little area that feels safe, but is really keeping us stuck. And so we need to work on believing like, hey, I can be a normal natural eater. This is 100% possible for me. I can be someone who eats intuitively, listens to their body. And this is my old self. My old self is the one who was dieting, who was binge eating, who was restricting, who was going all out, all or nothing all the time. And that's not me anymore. So kind of like shedding this old skin. So those are the 6 steps that I take people through in my program. And I think those are a good place to start looking at of, are any of these areas, do I feel like they're really like, I need to work on and I might want to do more research on them? You can go ahead to my podcast to find some resources there. And then where might you already be doing good too? Because my guess is that you're already being a natural intuitive eater in a lot of areas of your life, and you just might not be recognizing it and like really building upon that. So if this morning you woke up and you were hungry and you ate breakfast and you stopped when you were satisfied, woohoo, that's always like a third of your day that you were acting as an intuitive eater. So like look at those things and see like, what am I thinking there that I can use and build upon throughout the rest of my day too?
Yeah. Brilliant. I love your work because it just points the finger back inside. Like we're listening to our hunger cues. We're becoming aware of our habits. Like, I just love that you're like, well, you have the answer. It's like sometimes you just need the roadmap to get there. Like, that is brilliant. You are so well spoken. Your work makes so much sense. Thank you for all of this.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm curious, as we start to wrap up, I've got one more question, and then I'm going to give you like kind of the rapid fire questions that we do at the end of every interview. I'm curious, as we start to wrap up, like, where's the line between like healthy eating? I don't know if that's a word you would use. I also wrote like conscious eating and disordered eating. Like, is there like a line? Because I feel like there's so much, even like in the health spaces, that is focusing on intermittent fasting, or which I actually personally practice and feels really good for myself, but only at certain times in my cycle, and only when I feel like it, like only when it feels good, and then not when it doesn't. But like, there are so many little things like that, like don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat it in the night, don't eat it in the morning, don't eat it. Like, where's the line? Like, only organic. If you get an ounce of glyphosate in you, like, you're gonna die tomorrow. Like, all of these things. And like, so even in the health space, I see a lot of just unhealthy, for lack of a better word, like habits and ideas that are being thrown around. So like, for you and your clients, like, where's that line?
Yeah, I think it goes back to how things feel. So again, if something is making you fearful, anxious, afraid, that's a sign to check in. Instagram is a lovely place for some things, not so much for others. And I think nutritional advice is one of those things that we really want to take with a grain of salt, because it can go into the extremes a lot of times of, I remember saying like, I love this pasta, Banza pasta. And they're like, their chickpeas are like contaminated. Like you're going to get cancer and die. And I'm like, yes. Maybe, but like I love my Banza pasta, and sometimes it's the cheapest option, so I'm going to continue to eat it sometimes. And so really bringing your brain back into like questioning mode of like, is this really fully true, and using your logic around it, maybe doing further research and just checking in, because the truth is, like, if something was truly that poisonous, now this is gonna sometimes controversial, but if something is truly that poisonous, it's not gonna be in our grocery stores. Right. Like if you're gonna drop dead next week because of it, they're not going to put it on the shelves. Now, if there's something that you feel truly aligned with, or you've seen a lot of nutrition research that you want to choose to not eat, that's okay. But really asking yourselves, do I see myself doing this forever? And if so, why? If not, why? Because that will really give you a hint of, do I feel like this is actually something I really want to do and feels good to me? So if you're doing intermittent fasting and you're like, this feels really good to me and I would love to do this the rest of my life, then amazing. I don't consider that disordered. I think there's also on the other side of Instagram, a lot of the intuitive eater influencers are very much like, everything is disordered. Like you're ruining your relationship with food. And that can also be the extreme of like, well, like check in, maybe it feels fine. I think this also gets into when people are doing things for health concerns. I personally have worked with a functional nutritionist a few times to figure out some gut issues. I went on a big holistic acne healing journey where I was trying to heal it from the inside out, and I went gluten and dairy free. And I still, to this day, I choose not to eat dairy. I'm also a vegetarian. And so some people could say, oh, that's really restrictive, and why don't you eat dairy? And I say, you know what? I noticed, and I've done for myself, that if I eat dairy, I break out, and to me, that's not worth it. And so I choose not to eat dairy. And it's more of this choice versus this something that I feel like I have to do, and I'm okay doing it for the rest of my life. I also have clients who I occasionally run groups as well. And a lady in my group, I actually have her story on my podcast, April. She was doing intermittent fasting as well. And, I told her, I don't think you want to necessarily be advertising it to everyone just because some people think, oh my gosh, I need to do intermittent fasting now in order to get these results. But the truth is, it felt really good to her. And she's like, I want to do this forever. I love it. It makes me feel really amazing. And I'm like, awesome. Then that's not disordered. I have another client who occasionally does like 2-3 day fast, and she loves them. She thinks she feels so good after them. She just feels so cleansed out. And she's fully aware of, my brain might want more food. We've talked about how that restriction can sometimes lead to eating more food. So we have strategies for it. We've talked through it, and she feels really good about it. She loves it. And so I think it's like questioning, again, can I see myself doing this forever? And how do I feel about it? If I'm feeling fearful, anxious, restrictive around it, then probably not the best thing to do.
Love it. That is exactly what I was wondering. The Banza pasta thing is like exactly the thing. Like Chick-fil-A, I just saw a post today that Chick-fil-A has all these freaking things in their chicken nuggets. And we are not like a fast food family. I wouldn't ever say that. But like once every 2 months, I go through the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A, like once every 60 days because it's convenient and my kids are hungry and whatever it is. And I was like, you know what? I think they'll be fine. Like even after seeing that thing today, I'm like, sometimes it just is what it is, and that's okay. And then another example, that I'm going to add to your list too is like, typically when I have these podcast interviews, I notice that I'm more clear-headed. I can like less brain fog. I can kind of like find the words a little bit easier, and I kind of flow in the conversation better when I choose to skip breakfast. And like I've noticed when I have breakfast, like sometimes I'll have like oatmeal with peanut butter and bananas and walnuts and this like yummy, awesome breakfast, and I love it and it's great and it feels good for me. But then sometimes when I'm recording my episode, I'm like, oh, I'm a little foggy, like I'm feeling a little off. And so that was one thing I noticed about myself. For now, I reserve the right to change my mind in the future. And I love that you always like point it back to like, how's it making you feel? Like, where are you at right now? That is like such a beautiful approach. Okay. Where can we find you, follow you, learn more about your work? I'm going to link it all up below. So everybody go click below, but just tell us while we're listening.
Yeah, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at The Confident Eater. I also have a free Facebook support group on Facebook called Become a Confident Eater. So we'll put that in the notes as well. And then I have a podcast, Become a Confident Eater. It's all The Confident Eater everywhere. And then my website is theconfidenteater.org. And I have coaching available, both private coaching, one-on-one with me, and also group programs that run a few times a year. So you can go to my website and see what's available as the time you're listening to it.
Amazing. Okay, the first rapid fire question I have for you, Amber, is what's bringing you joy today?
So honestly, I'm living in Hawaii right now, so I just woke up for this podcast interview. So I would say either this, and yesterday I went for a beautiful hike. I'm here in Oahu. It was in nature, and just getting out in nature always brings me joy.
Ah, beautiful. What, if anything, are you reading right now? Do you have anything on your bookshelf in Hawaii?
I'm reading a book called Slow Productivity that I am loving, and it's all about how slowing down can actually make us more productive and gives us better ideas and deeper insights. And so I think it goes against, everything that we've been taught. And I would definitely recommend it. It's so good. And I think it can directly relate to food too, because if we can slow down with our food, we're able to be more mindful and more intentional and more in tune with our bodies. So I think it's a really good read.
Oh, that's going to the top of my list, which I say almost every single week with all these amazing book recommendations. Thank you. And then the last question I have for you is who or what has taught you the most?
Honestly, probably the first life coach I ever worked with. Her name is Brooke Castillo. She owns the Life Coach School. She is the one who I first started learning about coaching through. She has a podcast called The Life Coach School that I love as well. She unfortunately has stepped back quite a bit in her coaching practice and her podcast. I don't know if she ever puts out episodes anymore, but she has an amazing podcast that I'd go listen to at the Life Coach School, which is really what I teach through coaching. And I would say, in the broad sense, coaching has changed my life more than anything, and I've had a lot of amazing coaches throughout my time and my journey.
Thank you so much for this conversation again. It was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much, Ryann.
Hi again, friend. If you're listening to this, you made it to the end of a Raising Wild Hearts episode. Yay! Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you can hear more amazing conversations just like this one. And here's the deal. If you made it this far, go ahead and hop down on your podcast app and rate and review the show. Your words and 5 stars truly mean the world to me. Thank you for your support of the show. Thank you for showing up and listening week after week. I will be dropping new episodes every Monday, so tune in then, and I will talk to you soon.